Thank you for joining us for this very important edition of Infowars Nightly News. It is Monday, November 14th, 2011, and we have several special guests joining us this evening. Jason Burmis is one of them, but we have another surprise guest joining us as well, so you'll want to stay with us throughout the transmission. You know I like surprises. First off, the European Union is basically collapsing into the New World Order, as we predicted it would do. Every country that's taken over, trillions of dollars are demanded by the very central banks that created the derivatives, and then we're told a few weeks later that didn't fix anything. Now we need a total dictatorship. But it was the founders of the European Union who bragged that it was really a receivership to take over the sovereign countries and fully collapse their sovereignty into a banking dictatorship. And finally, publications like the London Telegraph are starting to do their homework. Headline, the EU's architects never meant it to be a democracy. The rise of a technocracy was always part of the plan for Europe. Kind of like 3 years ago when the editor, foreign affairs editor for Financial Times of London wrote, "And now for world government." That was the headline. And he said, yes, it's authoritarian. Yes, we kept it secret. Yes, it's global government, but it's for your own good. Goldman Sachs knows best. And Goldman Sachs put its alumni into all the presidencies and prime ministerships of these countries. They got them over the central banks of the countries, and now they are taking them down and jacking up the taxes, cutting the benefits, all to pay the debts created by Goldman Sachs, because the public is totally confused and doesn't know what's going on. But the globalists now want to rub it in to the slaves. It's like, look at you, you poor dumb yuppies. All you care about is acting trendy. Let us in Time magazine call for a Bank of the World to save everybody. And in fact, they say, do Greece and Italy amount to bankers' coup? Yeah, the bankers know best, as I heard Bloomberg Radio talk about and CNBC a few weeks ago. They said, don't worry, we'll get rid of all democracy in Europe and bring in a banking dictatorship. You pay your VAT, sales taxes, and carbon taxes too. Again, we bail out the banks, and then we pay them interest on the money we pay them. You can't make up the magnitude of this. Paul Watson wrote an article this morning at prisonplanet.com. Banker coup. Goldman Sachs takes over Europe. Financial terrorist who caused collapse poses EU debt crisis saviors. Over 90% of the debt in Greece, Ireland, and other countries. We told you it would move to Italy and then Spain, Portugal, and others. Over 90% of it is derivatives that they got the governments to sign on to the bankers too big to fail. So the bankers sell all this, get government to sign on to too big to fail, and then, oh, we're bankrupt, we got to raise your taxes to pay the bankers, their bailout money. And the bankers ride in on a white horse and say, we're going to cut all your budgets, take your pension funds, raise your taxes. And the media that they own says, thank God they're there. Thank God they did this. Except in one place, Iceland. Remember 2 years ago? They told them, oh, you owe hundreds of billions of dollars, a population of less than 400,000 with all their resources, all their oil from natural gas drilling, all their petrochemical money. And then they rioted, basically, and also just didn't comply with the government for over a year. And then it came out and they said England was going to sue them and mark all the Icelanders as terrorists. Literally, that was in the BBC, that they wouldn't be able to travel to England or Europe anymore if they didn't sign on to their debts. Finally, the head finance minister had to step down, and turned out 91% of the debt was not owed by Iceland. It was owed by the mega banks who'd gotten their operative to sign the country on for them. Ireland, the head of their central bank, said it's good for Ireland to be owned and run by foreign banks. That was a quote earlier in the year. This is just the treason. Traitors in America, traitors in Ireland, traitors in Greece, traitors everywhere. This is being done all over the globe. And we're going to cover this more with one of our guests this evening. Now, let's shift gears into the story of Ron Paul. Whether you love Ron Paul or hate Ron Paul, a guy who predicted everything that's now happening, the inflation tax, the New World Order, the Bank of the World, a true constitutionalist with a perfect constitutional voting record. He actually follows the founders' system. Now, if you don't like that, you hate America as well, not just Ron Paul. Well, Ron Paul, we've seen this now in over 10 debates, gets the least amount of time. And we've shown the numbers. Usually Mitt Romney gets 12 minutes and Perry gets 10 and so on and so forth. Normally Ron Paul gets around 4 minutes, never more than 5. But there's a new low. CBS, and their email got leaked now, CBS decided to not give Ron Paul basically any time, but to not cause a stink. They said, well, we'll at least let him be there. And they told the moderators only 90 seconds. We first started reporting on this. Drudge Report linked to it over the weekend. Now it's a big scandal. And turns out Michelle Bachmann, also there was an email out to suppress her and only give her a couple minutes. So they're very scared of Congressman Ron Paul. But we've got some new breaking news here for you. And this was dug out by one of our listeners that sent us tips. Rob Dew, one of our researchers and the director of the news, he spent a lot of the time today researching this and did indeed confirm that the YouTube video that we have of CBS News shot off the television and the screenshots we've got are indeed the same poll. And we've seen this over and over again. Ron Paul will get first, second, or third place, and they'll just remove him wherever he placed and then never mention him and then give whoever was below him his slot. Well, he won the CBS News poll, as he's won most polls. And it was geolocated. You can only vote once. He won that. CBS News just completely removed the poll, ran a fake one, and we got screenshots of that off their website where Ron Paul is removed. And then after they'd shown it on TV, a day and a half later, they put him back up on the screen. So there's the first one. Who is your choice for the Republican presidential nomination? That was on November 12th, 2011. Yes, same day, Ron Paul still winning. Okay, there's your numbers right there. Now, here's the video.
And a CBS News poll released just before the debate showed that Kaine was leading the pack with 18%. Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich were tied for second with 15%. From the CBS... And a CBS News poll released just before the debate showed that Kaine was leading the pack with 18%. Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich were tied for second with 15%. From the CBS...
By the way, I see this over and over and over again. In fact, go back to that first graphic. She's going off the same poll. That's the poll they're announcing. They have it posted. They simply skip Ron Paul and just go on to the next person. And then we have it from later in the day. They just simply make up whatever numbers they want and then never even mention Ron Paul. And we've probably written 20 or 30 articles or more on this where they're caught doing this everywhere. Jon Stewart famously cut together all the pieces showing them just ignore Ron Paul when he got second place. Remember that? In the Iowa straw poll. They would mention first, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. They'd mention people with 1% of the vote, but not Ron Paul. Not Ron Paul. When he wins straw polls, they won't mention him. Now let's show a day after this happened, then they bring the old poll back up and post it and change the title, but it's the same poll, same page. So there you have it. And they do this over and over and over and over again. In fact, we ought to do a piece tomorrow night, Rob, news director here, where we go back and we can't show, all the dozens of examples, but show 5 or 6 where they've cheated him in polls or where he was number 1 and they don't even mention him, or number 2, they don't mention him, number 3, they don't mention him. And now he gets 89 seconds. The memo said 90, but he got 89 seconds. Just incredible. In fact, here's a quote from the memo from CBS News. Ron Paul silenced by CBS. And then it goes over the quote. CBS News political analyst then responded, okay, let's keep it loose, though, since she's not going to get many questions and she's nearly off the charts in the hopes that we can get someone else. That's referring to Bachmann. So what did the media do today? Instead of focus on Ron Paul getting the least amount of time and clearly being the black sheep being ignored because they're scared of him, they focus on Bachmann, who also got cheated. Okay, continuing with Ron Paul coverage here. We have a headline at Infowars.com. Sabrin, fed behind effort to ignore Ron Paul. That's what he talked about on a television interview he did. In the video below, Murray Sabrin, a professor of finance at the Ansfield School of Business at Ramapo College in New Jersey, says the establishment media is ignoring Ron Paul because of the fact that he is a critic of the Federal Reserve. And it goes on. For months now, we have been told that the reason Paul is routinely sidelined by the media is because he can't win the nomination and he's too far out of the political mainstream to be a serious contender. Despite this explanation, Paul continues to win straw polls and raise millions for his campaign. He consistently places in the top 3, although the corporate media refuses to acknowledge this. Let's go ahead and play that clip of the professor stating the obvious.
And Ron Paul is the only one that's blown the whistle on the scam that's been in effect for 100 years now, since 1913. And that's the reason Ron Paul has been blacked out by the mainstream media. You can talk about all the other things, all the other issues, but that's the primary issue. Because if you don't have control of the money by the government, prices will come down, and we will have a much better economy. We'll have sustainable growth. We won't have the Federal Reserve manipulating interest rates and causing these bubbles.
Okay, so there he is, pointing out that the emperor has no clothes. Continuing now, we are going to shift gears before we go to break and look at the latest developments in Happy Valley or Satanic Valley or whatever it is there at Penn State. Petty Valley. Or, the point is you've got the prosecutor missing for 6 years who no-billed the investigation. You've got police who were told 18 years ago about the raping going on reportedly. You've got huge cover-ups all over the place. This is par for the course for the establishment. But I thought I would give you the latest developments on this. Not just the news reports coming out that he was reportedly pimping little boys out to the donors. Now the judge who released him, the judge that released him lowered his bail from $500,000 and ordered that he be freed on $100,000 unsecured bail. Well, it turns out that this judge works with and volunteers for the Second Mile Foundation. Isn't that just special? Continuing here, Merck's Kenneth Frazier is to head up the Penn State investigation, talking about preying on children, having Rick Perry come out and lie and say it's the law that all schoolgirls in Texas have to take the Gardasil shot to bluff people into taking it. And then Merck, knowing that government liability protection for vaccine damage would kick in, and Vioxx and all the other things that they've done, Frazier is literally a dark ringwraith type captain of this New World Order institution, another dark servant of the globalist operation, just like David Rockefeller and the rest of them. Just truly sickening that he's going to be sent in there. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've got witnesses saying, and a lot of corroborating evidence, that this head assistant head coach was raping people in the showers in full view of others, and then the police covered it up for all these years, and even though all these parents were complaining, and the Second Mile never kicked him out and just continued delivering the troubled children up to him, where there's one cockroach, there's hundreds. This is widespread. You can bet your bottom dollar on it. Continuing, the head of charity founded by Sandusky has resigned. They're now removing the names of all the famous people like Jack Ham, Franco Harris, Dr. Bryce Jordan, Arnold Palmer, Mark Wahlberg. And again, it's not saying any of these people are involved in this type of activity. These are well-meaning people. Most of them they're trying to help. But the point is that this is just a nightmare situation we've got going on with this. They're now removing their names from it. And then, of course, do we have a graphic of his book? When I saw this on the Drudge Report last week, I almost thought it was a joke, but sure enough, it's confirmed. His title was Touched, the Jerry Sandusky story, and they're still selling it in the school